Are you looking for a company that checks all the boxes? Waldorf Essentials provides homeschool curriculum written by homeschoolers for homeschoolers. We provide many options from digital to hard copies and individual blocks. Visit waldorfessentials.com.
Welcome to this week's podcast. Today we are going to talk about planning for the middle schooler. So in our other videos for planning, we talked about the younger grades, really up through class 5-ish. Now I want you to think about the child that is 12 to about 14. So we're gonna look at 6th, 7th, 8th. Now these go really well together when you're looking at the curriculum, and when you sort of look at the impulses of all 3 years, you can truly start to understand where the direction that we're going in. So in class 6, you're doing Rome, Life of Christ, that early space with the Middle Ages, all of that. And then in class 7, you're sort of like tackling the Renaissance, this other space. Class 8, you're supposed to bring history all the way up current. And in Steiner's time, that was easy, but that was 100 years ago. So I often tend to split the history in 8th to do 8th and 9th, just so that I don't feel rushed. Now, I would get as much of it done, of course, in 8th that you can, but also don't feel like you're rushing yourself, because you want to really spend a good amount of time on these more recent epics in history, so that you're not feeling like you're leaving your child to the world and they don't know what's going on, right? So you really want to make sure that you spend that time and take that time to go through those well. So in doing that, I'm laying out my blocks the same way. Now, as of the filming of this, we have just completed our class 7 revision. So you always have that you can fall back on if you need to see what my notes are, or you're really looking for some direction on how you can go, for sure. If not, I really look at books like The Task and Content of the Steiner Waldorf curriculum. That's a great place to start. And also Carl Stockmeyer's book, which is called the Rudolf Steiner's Curriculum for Waldorf Schools. Both of those are great books. I think they should be on your shelf if you're a longtime homeschooler, just so that you have an idea of what Steiner said and also what they're doing in the schools. I don't tend to use that yellow book, the Task and Content book, as much as I do the blue book, because the blue book talks about what Steiner actually said. The yellow book refers to Steiner, but really talks about what they're doing in the North American schools. So yes, while that information is helpful in sort of looking at my bigger picture, it is not necessarily as helpful when I dive into what I'm doing with my child. So I recommend those. If you're looking for a basic curriculum chart, we have a free one on our site in the resources section at waldorfessentials.com. So you can use that as a jumping off point. Really, when we are looking at these pieces of history, like I said, from class 7 class 6 to about class 9, you really want to make sure there's not gaps in there. So, when people come later to Waldorf, which is a beautiful thing to do, I'm always looking at, we want to make sure there's not a ton of gaps. Yes, it's really important that you understand ancient cultures. That's super easy. The content from classes 3 to 5, that's super easy to catch up with. But when it comes to classes 6, 7, and 8, and then 9th as well, we're really looking at making sure there's not gaps in history. We want to be able to have a good, clean timeline so that children can truly sort of see history unfold. Because, they're at the space now where you can sort of talk about, well, what is 100 generations ago? And they can think about how far back. When you think, well, from our generation to your parents' generation and then your grandparents' generation, you can sort of see that. And so they have a much bigger or better ability to sort of see the passage of time than they did before. So we really want to make sure that their passage of time goes in the right order. A lot of other homeschooling methods or schooling methods in general bounce around a lot. You don't see that in Waldorf. In Waldorf, we keep the timeline pretty linear. We want to keep it pretty straight so that they understand well, what comes next? Well, you know, like Greece came before Rome, and then what comes after Rome? Well, where do the explorers land in that? So we want to really keep that in order. And even though timelines can be incredibly boring, I do tend to do one about once a year, just so that they have this fluidity of it, so that they remember, oh yeah, well, this happened then, and then this happened. Because as we get, especially in the last 500 years or so, there's a lot of history that's happened that we really want to make sure that they have in order. And so that also brings, you know, a question that I get often: at what point do we put American history in there? So if you are an American, which, you know, I would say probably 75% of our listeners are. If not, just close your ears for a minute. But if you are an American, you really want to make sure that when you're working on Class 8, that you get those pieces of the founding documents and the understanding of how our country was born. And so that you can really like set your child off with all of that information. And I go into the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, you know, there is definitely some ugly with there. And we had that discussion, because by the time you're in 8th grade, then you've got a child that's 14. Their intellect is being born. They are ready for those deeper conversations, and they have opinions. So they still have opinions when they're 12 and 13, but those opinions start to really take a different shape when they're 14 and up. So I'm really like, we have those deep conversations, and we go on those field trips that leave them questioning, that leave them really thinking about the nature of things. And we want that at this stage in the game. We really want them to be able to be thinking about that. I think it's a really important part of their development. They have so much emotional development that's going on in these sort of middle school years. And this is a good thing to not have to think about themselves so much. They can really be thinking about the rest of the world. And I think it is a really important space. So when you're laying out your lessons, and I do want to say, if you get to this point and you're like, oh my gosh, this is just too much, consider Seasons of 7. Seasons of 7 is great for the homeschooling parent that wants some help. So Seasons of 7 is our virtual program. And within that program, we have Waldorf teachers that do the teaching for you. You're there to support still your child. You know, I mean, my oldest right now, as of the filming of this, is going to be a senior in the fall. I'm still supporting him. I'm still like making sure he gets his stuff done, making sure he attends his Zooms and all of that. So there's still that piece that you're doing as a parent, but the actual teaching comes from our Waldorf teachers. And that really takes the load off a lot of homeschooling families. So if you are thinking, oh my gosh, this is too much, even for just a semester, like consider that, because that allows you to stay within the Waldorf ecosystem. It allows you to sort of continue to keep homeschooling and keeping things in-house without the stress of that. So keep that in mind if that's something you need. But if you are planning to do all the homeschooling yourself, you know, I definitely use our Planning for Peace journal, and I lay out the blocks just like I discussed in all of our other planning videos. So you want to lay out the blocks, and don't forget that these older kids, like this is the time for all of those really cool field trips that you couldn't do when they were younger because they didn't understand. Like this is the time. So when you're laying out those blocks, make sure you're filling that in with plenty of enriching activities so that they are like truly understanding the content that you're bringing them. I like to go on road trips during these years and go driving to some of the places that will truly help them connect with the material. So make sure that you lay out your blocks really well. Then, you know, you would go from the block plan to the weekly plan, just like we do with all of our other curriculum. So from your block plan down to your weekly plan, I generally like to keep my plans around 4 weeks, generally 4 to 6 weeks. Some are a lot shorter. Some of them are a little bit longer, but I like to sort of keep it in that area because that kind of fills a month almost. So that's super helpful to me as I'm planning things out. But then when we're moving then to the daily plan, you know, that middle school space is different, and it's going to be different than moving forward for high school too. So while we have daily lessons, they're not as scripted at this point. So they are still, if you're looking at our curriculum, you know, we have daily lessons all through class 6. but we're also at this point in class 6, like really pushing you off the edge just a little bit. So I don't require 2 writing and 2 drawings a week. I require 1 piece of writing and 1 drawing a week, and it needs to be longer and better and really stretch them. Well, the same is going forward as you're going through, 6th, 7th, 8th, and above into high school. We're really trying to stretch them with what they already know. We're trying to stretch that writing capability. We're trying to stretch that art capability. And in doing that, I prefer to require less pieces, but more depth in those pieces. So as you're planning out your lessons, keep that in mind. Keep in mind that while you will go from your weekly plan down to your daily plan, it's going to look a little bit different because your concepts are going to flow a lot better than they were when you just had stories and pieces like that when they were younger. So sort of keep that in mind. Also, don't be afraid of this time. I mean, I really think that you can totally do this without a curriculum as long as you know what you're teaching, as long as you understand what Steiner's intent was. Definitely consider reading some Steiner. I feel like this time period, it's a lot of growth for parents. I like to really think about the developmental side of things. So, consider books like Between Form and Freedom by Betty Staley to help you sort of understand what's going on in the teenager mind. We often think about things when we think back on our teenage years. You can't really compare because when you're sort of standing from the parent standpoint, it feels a whole lot different than it did when you were a teen. So it is better to go and truly understand what the child is going through right now, because that will really help you as you're laying out your plans and as you're putting things together. I also want you to not stress a lot about mathematics. So I've said this in videos before, from about class 6 and up, we are looking at 1 hour of practice per week outside of a math block. So if you've been going gangbusters all this time, because I used to suggest more. I don't suggest more anymore. Actually went back to Steiner, and Steiner's words are exact. So 60 minutes a week if you're outside of a math block. So in a math block, of course, you're going to do that 30 to 90 minute per day lesson. But when you're out of the math block, you are just keeping up practice. So I say that, but I also want you to think, if you've got a child that really wants a science future or a mathematics future, then yes, you're going to want to add a little bit more. But for most children, that is not the case. We are walking through and allowing them to really unfold and really bring exactly what it is that they are wanting. We want them to create their lives, right? So I also have this feeling, after having raised the ones that I have, when it's just such a beautiful thing. And when you can realize this as a homeschool parent, we don't have to cram everything into them. If there's something that they want to learn when they become adults, guess what? They can go and learn it. So maybe your child struggles with mathematics, and you're just feeling really good that they've got an understanding of consumer math, because that's like pretty giant, right? So many school systems teach all of the scientific math, trigonometry and algebra and all that, but no consumer math. We've done some consumer math in class 6, but we really want that depth of that. We would rather have them really understand that when they leave home. I want them to know how to do their taxes. I want them to know whether or not somebody's cheating them on their paycheck. So we really want to sort of balance that. So as you're diving into what it is that you're doing with your child, just remember, if there's something that you miss or something that they don't pick up right away, right now when they're teens, they can always come back into it later. Like there's no reason why they can't. Just like you can learn new things at the age that you are, so can they. They can choose that. I had a conversation with one of my adult sons a few weeks ago, and he said, "Thank you for teaching me math. Because even though you didn't teach me plumbing, you taught me how," because he was going to school to be a plumber. He said, "You taught me how to know how to learn. So now I can go and learn this piece about plumbing. And you gave me this math background. So now I can apply it over here." And there's some stuff that I forgot, because gosh, people forget, right? I mean, when was the last time you did algebra? Then unless you were teaching it. So we want to sort of have this like ease of things. We want them to feel like they can pick it up and learn whatever it is that they want to learn. That is what I want my children to leave home knowing, is that yes, I've given them a great education, but now it's on them and they get to go and learn. And that is a pretty big piece. So just as I'm closing up here, I just want you to know, I don't want you to stress about these years. I don't want you to be worried about, you know, how you're going to do things and, oh my gosh, I don't have all of things in place. It's okay. Keep up with those basics, extend those basics, and just continue to expect more. Make sure your child does not get hung up in media at this age. You know, in most Waldorf homes, you've had low media all this time, and then all of a sudden, somehow, all these Waldorf families that I know have just like given their children a free reign over media. They don't need a phone yet. They don't need regular continued access to media. They don't need to be able to watch everything that they want to watch because they've all of a sudden turned 13. I want to just remind you that you are still in charge, that this is still your home, your space, your values, and you do not have to sort of hand everything over to the social media platforms. I would be very careful what you allow your child to do at this age. They are not emotionally mature enough to handle most social media. Even the pretty mature ones, I would wait until like 17, 18, 16, 17, 18, but definitely not 13, 14. And if you have already allowed that and the horse is already out of that barn, I could get the horse, bring it back in. You're the one who pays the phone bill. There's no reason why you have to allow it. You know, one of the things that I have really tried to always with my children is be able to say, you know what, I made a mistake. And I'm sorry I made that mistake. And I know that's got you frustrated. But we're gonna make a different choice now. And you can make a different choice when you're the parent of a 13-year-old, but this is the choice that I'm making with you right now. Yes, they'll be mad, and yes, they'll stomp off, and yes, they'll roll their eyes at you. And it might be tense, but hey, you'll save your home. So, as I'm closing up here, I just want to say, enjoy this time. Have a good time. If you're not having fun in any of this, like, you're doing something wrong. So hit me up with some questions if you've got them. I'm always happy to help. You're always welcome to come to our office hours. We have those twice a month. And if you've got questions about them, please drop us a note and we will be glad to answer them for you. Have a wonderful day.
If it's anything like our experience, we've been with Miss Daniela for 2 years. There's some transition period in the beginning for sure to like get the rhythm down of just something new. But beyond that, it's like the greatest gift for myself and my kids compared to us trying to struggle through homeschooling on our own in the beginning. And yeah, I do try to attend the parent office hours, and I highly recommend trying to do that if you can, because it really has become a really beautiful part of, I think, all of our weeks. When we meet there and get to ask all kinds of questions and talk about all kinds of subjects. But yeah, it's wonderful. I love it.
Thank you so much for sharing. There's nothing like a returning family to help spread the love.